we can go back and start thinking about what in the world we want to plug in to the let's see, the on value changed section here. So what I'm going to do is go back to code, go back to the inventory menu item toggle class. I'm going to make a new function to plug into there. Now remember, when we want to plug stuff in like that, it has to be public to sort of expose it to the editor. There's no way to like serialize a function, unfortunately. So I have to just make it public, even though I don't need to call this from outside of this class. So I'm going to say, this is public void inventory menu item was toggled. Okay. And I'm going to put a good summary on here just to make sure it's understood that this is meant to be called from that on value changed property. So we're going to say this will be plugged into the toggles on value changed property in the editor. And called whenever the toggle is clicked. Okay. So what do we want this thing to do? Well, actually, it's not quite right. If we look at that again, this is kind of annoying. I have to keep clicking it over and over. So if we look at this thing, you can see how it has a parentheses Boolean here. That means there's a Boolean parameter we can use for methods that we plug into this. So if I go back over here, I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that, and I'm going to call it bool is on, just because that's the way they call that here. And so I'm going to do something different. You know, this value will come in as true if I selected the thing, and if I click off of it and I'm therefore sort of deselecting it, it'll come in as false. And I only want to do the thing if it's true. So basically, whatever I wind up doing when the player clicks on these things, I'm only going to want to do it if isOn is true. So I can make a note of that. So I'll put a little comment that says, we only want to do the stuff when the toggle has been selected, not when it has been deselected. Okay. And before I get into what I'm actually going to do there, I'm just going to comment this out for the time being. Let's just put a debug.log, and we'll use an interpolated string and give ourselves a little message to see if this is working how we expect. So we'll say toggled, and then in curly brackets we'll print the value of whatever isOn is. I just hit tab to advance through the stuff I didn't want to put my semicolon inside of, and once I got to the very outside I hit semicolon. Okay, so now if I save and I go to the editor, I'm gonna have to go back to that prefab. So stop the game here. Let's go into our prefabs folder. Go ahead and find the inventory item toggle. Open that prefab. And we're going to add something to this on value changed. And luckily the script that we care about is part of the prefab, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it like this. And I'm going to click this drop down and I'm going to find the inventory menu item toggle script and then look for that method we just made, which was this one. Inventory menu item was toggled, parentheses bool. So when I believe what's going to happen is when I select those toggles, it will start printing whether or not I'm going to zoom back out a little here. It should start printing. I'm just going to hit clear. So toggled false. Interesting. I guess I would expect one of them to be true and one of them to be false each time I click it. So I know what I've done incorrectly here. I'm going to have to go look at this prefab again. In this onValue change, this is pretty easy to mess up. Select this and go back to the script. Note that I can pick this here, or I can go up to where it says dynamic bool and choose it there. And this is what I need. I need this dynamic bool. It just means it's going to actually pass in the data that I want based on the state of the toggle. Okay, so let's try this again. That's kind of an easy thing to overlook. Okay, so I'm going to clear my console so that it's easy to read. And so this guy is true. Now one of them's false and the other one is true. This is working correctly. So, because essentially each time I click one, I'm toggling one off, I'm toggling one on. So that's why it's working that way. Cool. That's what I wanted to see. So what do I want to do besides print that? I need to do, when this thing is toggled on, I need to basically go back to this. I need to update this text and this text. So how am I going to do that? I think what I'm going to do is use this opportunity to remind us about our observer pattern and reinforce that, even though there's more ways we could do this. So what I'm going to do is find our inventory menu script here, and I'm going to make a couple new fields here. So the first one, these are all going to be serialized fields. So the first one is going to be a private text, which is like a UI thing, but we already have our using Unity Engine UI, so we're in good shape. So a text, and I'm going to call it, let's see, item label text. And we can go ahead and give this thing a tooltip. And we will say that this is the place in the UI for displaying the name of the selected inventory item. Okay. I'm just going to copy all of this because the next thing that I'm going to do is also going to be a text. And this one I'm going to call description area text. And let's say this is the place in the UI for displaying info about the selected inventory item. Okay. So to point out which is which, this one is the description area, that's the label. Alright, so actually, if I save this, I just need to go ahead and plug it in anyway. So, scene, and here's our inventory menu. Here's our 2 new fields we made. Let's go ahead and find this one. So here's the selected item label text. So we're gonna drag this guy right in there. And then the description area text, that would be this. So this text component is actually on this thing called content. So I'm going to go back to the menu and drag this one that says content right here. So now I've got these 2 texts plugged in the way I need them to be. I'm going to save my scene. And now I suppose it's time to deal with our observer pattern. So my goal is to basically have the inventory menu observe the inventory menu item toggle. So this will be the subject, and we're going to observe it from here. So in other words, whenever this thing gets toggled on, it's going to announce to the world that it got toggled on, and anyone out there who wants to subscribe to that can react to it. And in this case, it'll be the inventory menu that reacts to it, in which it will update these 2 fields. So we are going to go ahead and make a public static event, and it's going to be an action. And you need a using statement for actions. That's using system. And we're going to call this inventory menu item selected. So we're going to announce whenever an inventory menu item is selected. But we have to do a little bit more than that. We have to actually not just announce that, but we have to carry with that announcement the actual inventory object that is related to that item, because the inventory object will tell us its description and its label. Just to demonstrate that that's true, I can find wherever my inventory object is. So you can see the inventory object knows all of this stuff. It knows its name, it knows its description. Okay. So whenever a menu item that gets selected, we need to broadcast, yes, something was selected, and this is the object that got selected. Okay. Next up, we have to figure out when that happens, and it's actually going to happen right here. So if the toggle was clicked, we have this working already. We only want to do this if the toggle was clicked and toggled on. That's how we know it was selected. So we will say the name of our event, which was inventory menu item selected, and Visual Studio events have the little lightning bolt. And then remember, we only want to do this if anyone cares. And the sort of shortcut, the syntactic shortcut for that is this question mark period. And then so we're going to call invoke. And again, we're only, what this does, it's just the same as like this, except it will not do it if this is null, basically. So it's just it's like a shortcut it helps us avoid having to write an if statement that says if this is not null, do this. All right, so we want to call invoke. Notice that it's giving us an error, and it's saying that we have to pass along an argument that corresponds to the required formal parameter, which in this case is of the type inventory object. So this is where we say not only did an inventory menu item get selected, but this is the particular inventory object that's related to that. And so we're going to pass along this thing. So we will say associated. I don't know, we can just go ahead and use the property. That'll work. Either one would have worked here, but I guess I'm going to use the property just in case down the road there's ever something I put in this getter that I want to make sure always happens when I use it. If I start not using it by using this one, that would not get, the getter won't get called if I use this one. So in this case, it makes no difference, but just to kind of future-proof it, I'm going to use the property here. So we're officially announcing that this interesting event has occurred. Now we just have to set someone up to listen for it and care. Or in other words, we have to subscribe to this event somewhere. And this is going to happen in our inventory menu class. So in here, I'm going to make a method, a private void, and it's going to be named after the event. So the event was called inventory menu item selected. So I'm going to call this on, and then Control V, paste that in there. So on inventory menu item selected, and this in order to fit that event, it has to take a parameter of the type inventory object. So we have to add that in. We can call this okay. And so when a new inventory menu item is selected, I need to do a couple of things. I need to update the item label text .text. Remember, if you go look at that text component, like here's the item label text. So this is the component, so that's the text, and this is the text property of the text component. It's kind of confusing, but that's what that is referring to here. This text.text is so we're gonna set that equal to the name of the inventory object that was selected. And so remember, .name here is something that every object has, and that's just going to be like the name in the hierarchy. We want to use .object name, which is going to be, let me find an inventory object. That would be this one, whatever's typed in here. That just frees us up to be able to present some information to the player that's maybe a little different than how we want to organize our hierarchy. Okay, so that's going to update that. The other thing we need to update is this description area text.text, and that's going to equal the inventory object that was selected .description. All right. So the last piece of this observer pattern puzzle, when at least as it relates to C#, is to create an on enable and an on disable. And you're going to create these in your class that's subscribing to the event. And this is where we actually do the event subscription. So in on enable, we will say, let's see, what class was that in? Inventory menu item toggle. So in that class, there's an event. This is all the stuff in that class. If I just click this lightning bolt, it will find me only the events. So that event, I want to add this event handler on inventory menu item selected. Cool, that takes care of that. But remember, you always have to remember to unsubscribe from events whenever your class goes away. So inside of the onDisable, I need to change this to a minus equals, and that takes care of unsubscribing. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a summary to this and just say that this is the event handler for inventory menu item selected. And I think this parameter name is really clear, so I'm just going to delete that part. Okay, I guess there's a thin chance this works now. I feel like maybe I'm overlooking something, so I'm going to save everything, and we can try it. I'll run the game. Let's go pick some stuff up. So let's take the note, and let's look at my inventory and see if I click this, in theory it'll update all this stuff. Oh my goodness, it worked. So when I clicked on the note, it tells me that this is the name of the thing and this is the description text. Let's go try picking up the key. So I have the key, I have the note. So it's pretty much working. There's one more thing I want to do, but it's easy. So when we first run our game, observe what we see in the menu. Lorem ipsum and this placeholder text. So I think we need to create a sort of like an initial message here that helps clarify. It just doesn't look, A, it doesn't look like placeholdery, and B, it clarifies what this is, because while I know this is the inventory menu, some random person who sees this junk is not going to get it. So we need to kind of add a little bit of usability enhancement here. So I'm going to kill two birds with one stone and replace my placeholder text here with, this long text was just meant to prove that our scrolling was working correctly. Now I'm going to replace it with what I want it to actually be here when the game first starts. So I'm going to type some kind of message that explains what this is. So we'll say something like, items you have collected are displayed to the left. Select, I'm going to get a new line to make it easier. Select an item for more information about the item. Okay, so that kind of explains how the menu works. This one, I just don't want any words to be here until you select something. But this is, looking at this has made me remember something we should have figured out. What happens if I have an item that has very many characters in its name, like item with really long name? So you can see it just gets cut off. Well, you could be like, well, I'll just count the number of characters. But I don't know if you knew this or not, but not every character takes up the same width. So for example, I can fit like way more I's than I could fit, say, W's. So you can't, unless you use a font where every character is the same space, you can't just count characters like that. The best case, or the best way to deal with it, is to use this option that says best fit. And if I do this and I start typing item with a really long name, you can see what it's doing. It's automatically adjusting the scale to fit within the bounding box. And that's perfect. So I'll just replace this with nothing. So we don't see anything in there at the beginning. Now that I got my best fit thing checked, I'm going to run the game and look at this menu before I've clicked anything. Looks good. Pick some stuff up. This all looks good to me too. So I'm convinced that this is working. So I think we can finally call the inventory menu video series complete. And I do remember there was a bug I wanted to fix where if I was like looking at a door and then clicked, it still opens. I'm going to call that something I'll get to later. So our next sort of milestone for this project is going to be all about polish, and we can include that little bug in the polish section if I remember it. All right, cool.